Okay, so day one of HTML updated. So the first thing we need to talk about with HTML is everything that you see that's going to be an HTML file or something that goes on the site is going to be in a specific folder. So normally I use my last name and then the word site. That's what you guys are going to be doing for your final when it comes up. But any images that show up in anything, maybe there's an underscore at most, but there's no spaces, there's no weird symbols. So naming conventions is going to be very, very, very important. The other thing to realize is that what you're actually dealing with is a text file. There it is. This is, if you open it up in some sort of text edit document, this is what you see, right? It's just it's words, it's letters, it's weird symbols, and those weird symbols are part of the reason why we don't name things with weird symbols, because we need slashes to mean you're in a folder, and we need these carets to mean you're in a tag, and things like that. So all of these things we have to deal with, and so we need to be very careful how we're naming things, but it's all text. So we have to tell HTML what to do with just text, so that we can, if I open this up in Chrome, have something resembling a website. This is a slightly older version, so ignore the fact there's only 3 buttons and they're horrible looking. But what happens with this is that the text is written in a certain way that the browser knows what to do to make images do things, right? It pulls in the images, it puts the text in a certain way. We're telling it with HTML, with this language, to shape the text like this and put it below the menu, which is 3 buttons in a row, which is below the banner. Now, how do we do that? Well, we use something called, I call them containers, but they're basically just these boxes. First of all, everything in HTML has to be in a grid, which we'll get a better view of when I bring up the other version of this. So here, I made it so that the boxes had color. I wrote it into the code. I told it to make this box this color and this box this green color, and so you could see what the containers look like. And so you can see why the text doesn't go out here. I've told the box to be only however many pixels wide. I said, no, bio gallery contact, welcome, here we go, 600 pixels. I specified 600 pixels. That's what it has to be, so that you could keep that text within a box. Now, for the copyright in the email, I didn't specify anything. I specified a background color. You can see it's 2 different colors. We'll get into hexadecimal in a minute. Nope, sorry. But you can see I didn't specify a width. And so what's happening is the text is being centered because I told it to do that somewhere else. But if I wrote longer amounts of text, it wouldn't start making new lines. It would run out to the edges here, right? So all of this text, which is, you can see here it's in black, this right here, I told it within this, it's called a div in this case, I said to align center. And for this other one, I said align center, and so that way it's keeping both of these in the center. And then what it's doing is, if I kept typing, and then save this, if I go back to the browser and I reload it, you can see it's just making the line longer with my gibberish, right? So this is looking to this text file. This text file tells it what to do. Now, one of the things that's a little bit harder to see, I'm going to put some spaces in here so we can tell what's going on. There we go. So I'm using div tags here. You could actually use any kind of tags. In our example, there's gonna be all sorts of different names for them, right? So I have a div here that holds my name, and I'll get rid of the gibberish. In order to do a copyright symbol, I have to do this and #169 semicolon. That's how you write a copyright symbol. And then there's another container that holds contact information and then a link to, click on to make an email. So there's one container, there's the other container. They are both themselves in a container that's where I told it to be centered, right? So you're going to see that same thing everywhere. Here we have a paragraph of words, another paragraph of words. They are all in a container that it has been specified should be 600 pixels. Auto margin is centering it, and the background color is that pink salmon color, which is why you get this. So we have to be explicit when we tell these things what to do. So that's all this example is this these weird colors are showing you the boxes. That's how we deal with everything in HTML. We put it in containers. All right, but this right here that I'm using with the text, this is a little bit more advanced because it's just a text box, and we actually want something new, where we can edit things a little bit more intuitively. You still can't drag and drop, but we can get a preview that's right there. And so we're gonna, in the Dreamweaver folder, which you can get from the 101 drive or the network drive, there's a file in there called template. And instead of double clicking on it, which would open it in your guys' browsers, I'm going to say open with Dreamweaver. And we get this. There we go. Now, yours might not look like this at first. If you are in a computer lab, you are going to have to click on here where it says developer and bring it to standard. You will also have to click at the top here. Once you bring this to standard, these words will show up and you have to click split. And then probably it's going to split it top to bottom, which means you have to go to view, split vertically instead of horizontally. And then I put the live view on not the left. It's mostly out of habit. I'm just not used to it being over here. For whatever reason, I could put it on a second monitor if I wanted to. So there you have it. All right. But you'll see here that the example, this template that we're using, this is what you should start your final on. So this particular walkthrough is going to involve talking about how to set up all the stuff that is the same on every page. So not this part that says put unique information here. That's actually going to be different on every page. What we're talking about is your buttons, which currently are all over the place. Don't worry about that. We're going to fix it. Your logo, your header, whatever you want to call it, which is going to come from Illustrator. And the menu that's at the bottom, and potentially putting a copyright in at the bottom. All right. So, but step one is to simply learn what these things mean. The other thing we have to look at right away is you'll see up at the top here it says source code, and then it says css.css. A CSS is a cascading style sheet, and it is simply another way of writing information for HTML, but it's designed around making things look like things. So it's height and width and where things are aligned, and if there's borders and background colors and everything. It's technically a different language, and so you'll see the syntax will be very, very different than what you see in here. Right here, things are something something equals, and then it's in quotes. CSS, it's the something colon another thing semicolon, right? This is two different ways of saying the same thing. So depending on which of these two pages you're on depends on what you're going to be doing. And the way these two pages talk to each other is when this was created in the first place, this HTML file, when it was created, it was paired with this CSS file. So you guys don't have to do that. If you get a thing that's saying it's not paired, you can actually click on it and say get, and you can navigate to the file. But it means you do have to have both files with you. So wherever you're working, you have to take the CSS file and the template, and you don't rename the CSS. Just leave it. Just leave it alone. I know I'm usually saying put your last name on everything. This one case, don't put your last name on anything. All right. The last thing you need to do, you have to do it before you open it, I think, because we're in the folder. So you'll have to close out of Dreamweaver. But if you are starting your final, you need to rename this Dreamweaver folder to last name and then site. Otherwise, you'll be submitting something to me that's in a folder called Dreamweaver, which is fine, but make sure you are keeping everything in this folder. Everything you put in here has to be in this folder. I cannot stress this enough. It's been difficult enough with Premiere and with Audition to deal with files linking. This time it is absolutely positively crucial, and that is a basic computer skill that you should be learning at this point and have down. So all files end up here. Worst case scenario, you have a subfolder called images. Not required, but if you have a really large gallery, it's not a bad idea. Subfolders are fine. What you can't do is say, oh, I'm going to link to my stuff that's like over here. No. Has to all be in the same folder. All right. So how do these two sheets talk to each other? Source code and CSS. Well, they've been linked, but they have to tell each other what's going on. And that's where all these tags come in. And I'm going to see actually about magnifying things. So I'm going to pause a second. Okay, magnifier is turned on. So we need to talk about the text, and we need to be able to see the text. So all of these things that are in these carets, the sort of greater than and or less than and greater than symbols, these are called tags. So if I say the tag, go between the two tags, this is one tag. Right? So here's an end tag because it's got a slash. And then here is the start of the next one. So if I say go between them, I mean click there, right between these two carets. But you can see, unlike my first example where everything was called div, here there's one thing called div, they all just have names. This was set up by someone else, but basically this is called nav because it's the navigation, otherwise known as a menu. In there is something called UL, and in there is actually 4 different things called the same thing. And all of these are referenced in the CSS. There's the nav, we'll get to section in a minute, LI, and UL. Now, why have the same thing? Well, because all 4 buttons should be the same. And it is much, much easier to have all 4 buttons be the same if you give them the exact same name and you don't have to repeat it. Now, there is a trick for getting your buttons to all be a little bit different if you need it. But essentially, this works like so. LI is what defines these buttons, and right now they're all stacked, one on top of the other. And the only thing specified about them is the width and height, which is great, except you wouldn't know what they look like with width and height if they don't have a border. So I can type in border-style, colon, and you can see it's kind of giving me some options. I can click on solid, and then everything you do has to end with a semicolon. And you can see what happened here. Now that's great, except this is not a good size, right? So we don't want that. You can specify them to be that big, or you can specify them to be 50 pixels. Or since we have different sized words, I can get rid of width altogether, and I can say padding, and I can select left is 20 pixels. You have to spell out the PX. There we go. And that is not listening to me at all. Oh, I know what's going on. Hang on, there's one other thing we have to change. Padding right, because these things all talk to each other. So as I type that in, see how it's like kind of correct here and then like going off the deep end here? There's one more thing I have to put in before any of this will work. And it's display, colon, inline. And that is certainly the least intuitive thing I've typed so far. Basically, it's saying we want them in a line. We want them all in the same row. And as soon as you do that, it starts to listen to things about how much padding there is between these, right? Now we've got this. Look how lovely. I can say things like border-color. And then if I type in a hashtag, I can choose a color. It's not going to update live in here, just so as you know. But whatever I select, it's going to come up with a hexadecimal. Hexadecimal is an abbreviation. It's a condensation of code. So if binary is 0101110, this is a condensation of that because it's 0 through 9 and then A through F. So each letter contains 0 through 6 or 0 through 15, right? So it contains 16 potential numbers, and so that way you can spell out a color. And essentially, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 is black, F, 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 F is white, and then everything else is in the middle. So I'm just going to leave that blue for now for funsies, and now it's listening to me. But there's a lot of different border things we can do. We can also say border, nope. See, it actually doesn't matter where I type that, but it's much helpful if I type it in the next line. Border, radius, 12 pixels, an arbitrary number. Now it's very rounded. 12 pixels is the radius of the circle that's around the corner. Now, maybe I don't want it really rounded, I want it a skosh rounded, and so I say 4 pixels. Now, this is all very, very pixelated because I'm zoomed in. This is not really what it's going to look like. All right, so this is how this idea works. I say these things, spelling out what this tag should do. It should have padding on the left and right, so meaning it should be X big, and around the text, and there should be a border that's solid and it has this radius, and it's displayed in a line, and I'm spelling out that I want that. All right. I can also, you can see that my image wants to be bigger than the space that's in it because the header that's holding it is not big enough. I can spell out that that should be 200 pixels, and now it's too low. Or that's 250. That's no good. Yeah, there we go. So now this will actually show up below the image. If I go back to my source code, though, I can't change where these are. I can. I shouldn't, though. If I'm making changes for location over there, I should make it over there. But what I can do is change the image that's being used here, because right now there's no image, there's nothing in my folder called Illustrator logo. I have to find what mine is actually called. Now you need to export this from Illustrator, same as we did before, going File, Export, and you need to make sure it's a PNG. And when you get to this, that it uses artboards, that uses only the first artboard so that it doesn't have all 3 images. But then in the second box, you have to spell out that it should be 72 dpi. 300 dpi will be too big. All right. But if I click here, this is the only intuitive thing you're ever going to do is change an image. If you click where the image is supposed to be, because we've set a box up for it. We've said this image tag, and so that's what you're looking at. But as soon as you do that, for an image, you get this little options box. And I click on it, and it says source, this. Well, that's not the name of my image. So if I click on the folder, it looks to here, and this is not where I need to be at all. It's not putting me in the folder that I'm working in. Fun fact, it's putting me wherever the last place I was in Dreamweaver. Ah, there we go. So now I'm at Benvenuto. It's called that. I could type this in manually, but who wants to remember, that off the top of their heads? And hit OK. And we get this. And it brings it in, and it says it's a height of 1200 or 200 and a width of 1200. And so one thing I'll need to make sure to check is, does that work with the site as it is right now? It's probably a bit too long. I may need to adjust. Yeah, right now the container that holds the site is only 1,000 pixels. So I'm going to make that 1200 just so it can match. Same with the header. I want these things to be the right size. And I'm going to zoom out from the whole thing for a minute so we can see how it's going. All right, so this is how you have to work. You have to put stuff in one location on the CSS sheet, and then most of that goes in the CSS sheet, and then occasionally you have to go back to the source code and make a change in there. If I need this to not be labeled gallery or about. Let's change about. What if I wanted that to be called bio? I would change it here. But now there's a menu item down here. All right, any of this white text is just plain text. I need to change it here too. So you need to be consistent and also pay attention to the fact that it's in all caps right now. Whoops. There we go. Oh, the bottom one is in all caps. That's why I'm not seeing it. Okay, so the information that is being presented is on the source code. How the information is presented is on the CSS. All right, so I think that's enough for one video. The next video is going to go over how to like really make this look nice and just some other specific ideas of what you can do to get things the way you want.